Have you ever stared into a woman's silence and felt like you were falling into a storm? Not the loud kind, but the quiet, coiled kind where every smile hides 1,000 spinning shadows, and you don't know if you're being loved or led off a cliff. There was once a man who loved a woman the way boys love the moon from a distance. Longing, mystified, she was the kind who looked at you like she already knew all your secrets, but would never tell you hers. He chased her not because he understood her, but because her chaos made him feel alive, like dancing on the edge of a flame. He told himself it was passion, but deep down, he knew it was fear. Fear of losing her, fear of being ordinary, fear of not being enough to calm the storm in her eyes. And so he stayed. Through the cold silences, through the beautiful chaos, through the emotional riddles she never explained, only performed. But chaos then has a nature, and it was Heraclitus, the shadow-brooding philosopher of fire and flux, who whispered the truth that most men still run from character as fate. And what is the character of woman not as an individual, but as an archetype, as an ancient echo etched in the soul of man? It is water and fire, seduction and abandonment. It is a rhythm of longing and withholding. And the tragedy is not her, but the man who worships her chaos, hoping it will someday stabilize. Heraclitus saw the world not as a place of fixed things, but of constant becoming. Everything changes, everything burns, and emotion, above all, is the most volatile fire. To Heraclitus, Logos, the hidden order behind reality, was not peace, but tension, harmony through conflict, a dance of opposites. The way up and the way down are one and the same. This wasn't poetry, it was prophecy. And nowhere is this more alive than in the emotional maze between man and woman. What if you've been trained not by truth, but by comfort to see female emotion as pure, innocent, even divine? What if that belief is the most dangerous delusion of all? You see, there is a pattern. You might have missed it, or maybe you've felt it in the way her affection turns cold without warning, in how a moment of connection dissolves into accusation, in how you're slowly trained to doubt your own instincts, just to keep her happy. And here, the myth begins, not a fairy tale, but an ancient psychological theater, anima and logos. The woman who enchants, the man who forgets himself, the chaos that consumes, and the quiet death of the masculine soul who wanted to fix what was never broken, only wild. Heraclitus would say, you step into the same river twice, but the river has changed, and so have you. That's what loving a woman who doesn't love herself feels like. The same fights, the same tears, the same longing, but slowly, something inside you begins to shift. You become less bold, less clear, less you. You shrink, not by force, but by slow erosion, the way cliffs are carved by waves that don't stop. This is not a story of blame. This is a mirror, because the chaos you see in her is the part of you that hasn't yet healed, the part that needs drama to feel alive, the part that calls suffering love, the part that would rather be confused than be alone. And it is in that confusion that your fate is sealed, but not irreversibly, because Heraclitus didn't just speak of chaos. He spoke of awakening through chaos. That's what most men never hear, that the storm isn't there to break you. It's there to wake you. There was a boy once, not a boy in age, but in spirit. He stood at the edge of a relationship like someone standing at the shore of a churning sea, hoping if he waited long enough, the water would calm and let him in. She was beautiful, not in the way magazines describe, but in that intoxicating, unstable way that draws you in and shakes something old in your chest. She spoke in riddles, kissed with urgency, vanished in moods she never explained. One day, she would worship him like a god. The next, She would look through him as if he were nothing but smoke. He told himself this was depth, that she was sensitive, that if he could just understand her, she would finally be whole and love him in return. But what he didn't realize is that she didn't want to be understood. She wanted to feel, and feeling, for her, meant movement, emotional motion, turbulence, contrast. She needed the fight to feel the passion. She needed your confusion to prove her power. And so, her chaos wasn't accidental. It was ritual. This is the feminine chaos Heraclitus warned of. Though he never named it that way, he spoke instead of fire. Not just literal fire, but psychic fire, the burning that transforms, that devours, that consumes all that resists its nature. In her. This fire moves as emotion. In you. It burns as confusion. Why does she test you? Why does she punish your stability? Why does she vanish when you offer peace? Because the unconscious feminine, unintegrated and wounded, fears containment more than destruction. And when a man offers love, she experiences it not as safety, but as a trap. She will burn it down to feel free. And yet here's the deeper cruelty she wants you to stay, to keep holding her through the madness. She needs your steadiness as proof of her worth, but she will never allow you to rest in it. This is the endless loop. The man who stays, hoping to be chosen. The woman who tests, hoping to be held. Neither truly seeing the other, each projecting an ancient wound. And Heraclitus, standing in the ruins of his own time, would call this not a tragedy, but a law. War is the father of all things. He said, not war as violence, but as tension, opposition, friction, the fire that forges identity. The woman's chaos is not evil. It is simply unrefined fire. It has not yet met a man who sees through it without needing to fix it, who can witness the storm without becoming the storm. But to become that kind of man, you must pass through your own darkness. You must ask, why do I stay in what harms me? You must ask, what am I calling love? That is really abandonment, dressed as devotion. Because she is not doing this to you, she is doing this with you. And until you break the rhythm, until you stop performing your role in the drama, the script will never change. Heraclitus believed in fire as the fundamental nature of reality, but not all fire is destructive. Some burns to awaken, some burns to purify, to illuminate, to burn away illusion. And when you finally see her, not as a goddess to worship or a puzzle to solve, but as a mirror reflecting your own disowned chaos, something shifts. You no longer need her to love you to feel whole. You no longer need her approval to know your worth. You simply see, and in that seeing, the chaos loses its power, because the fire cannot burn the man who has already walked through it. He didn't leave her in anger. That's what most people assume, that the man who walks away from the emotionally chaotic woman does so out of rage, revenge, or rejection. But no, he left in silence, a silence that wasn't empty, but full of understanding, of clarity, of mourning the version of himself that once needed her to feel alive. He had stood at the edge of her emotional abyss for so long, hoping she would rise. But the truth was, he was the one who needed to rise. Not above her, not in judgment, but beyond the trance of trying to save her from herself, the trance of believing her storm was proof of passion, the trance of thinking love meant pain, unpredictability, sacrifice. He began to realize that her chaos, once intoxicating, was no longer mysterious. It was predictable. The same triggers, the same vanishing acts, the same cycle of blame followed by apology, followed by seduction. Heraclitus would say, the unseen harmony is better than the visible. And now, this man could see the visible, and he no longer mistook it for truth. He saw how her chaos was not spontaneous. It was patterned, reflexive, a self-fulfilling script passed down through generations of women who had been taught that emotional chaos made them interesting, desired, unreachable, and worse, how men had been trained to pursue that chaos, to prove themselves through suffering. This was the real tragedy, not just her fire, but his fascination with it, because he had confused being burned with being alive, and now that spell was broken. There's a moment in every man's life, a quiet, private moment when he finally admits, this isn't about her anymore. This is about me. Not as blame, as ownership. It is the moment the boy in him dies. The boy who wanted a mother and a lover. The boy who made her moods his mission. The boy who found meaning in chaos because stillness felt like death. And when that boy dies, a man is born not in muscle or money, but in mind. He becomes the logos Heraclitus spoke of, the calm principle in the center of flux, the one who does not escape the fire but stands inside it, unchanged. This kind of man does not run from feminine chaos, nor does he chase it. He sees it, he respects it, but he does not need it. And so, when she tests him, and she will, he does not flinch, he does not argue. He does not explain himself into exhaustion. He simply remains, and in that stillness, a new kind of power is born, the power of non-reactivity, of presence, of internal order. This is what Heraclitus meant when he said, it is in changing that things find rest, not changing her, but changing his relationship to her chaos. Because the truth is, most men try to win the war of emotion by becoming more emotional. They plead, they cry, they prove. But all that energy is fuel to the fire. What the storm fears most is the man who doesn't dance to its rhythm, the man who anchors. This isn't stoicism in the cold sense, it's something deeper. It's integration. The logos and the anima, the fire and the form. He becomes a temple not built to worship her moods, but to withstand them. And in doing so, he offers her something rare, the reflection of a man who cannot be moved by illusion. Some women will be drawn to this. Some will run from it. But either way, he is free. It was raining the night she called him again, not with words of love, but with a soft, nostalgic cruelty, the kind of voice that says, I miss you, without admitting I miss the way you held me while I fell apart. He listened, not because he wanted her back, but because something in him had changed. He no longer needed to protect himself from her. There was no longer a wound she could reach. She spoke of dreams, of confusion, of the strange emptiness she felt now that he was gone. She asked if he ever thought of her, if he remembered how she used to light up when he walked into the room. But the man who answered her was no longer the man who once waited by the phone, decoding her silences like sacred texts. He had tasted something stronger than her chaos, his own clarity. There was kindness in his voice, a softness she hadn't heard before. But underneath it was steel. She could feel it. And for the first time, she was afraid not of losing him, but of seeing herself reflected in his stillness. Because chaos only thrives when it's mirrored, when it finds someone willing to be thrown, twisted, broken for its sake. But this time, there was no mirror, only a man quiet, rooted, whole. Her voice trembled. She asked if he still loved her, and he paused, not out of hesitation, but reverence. Then he said something that shattered the spell between them. I loved who I thought you were, but more than that, I love who I became because of it. That was the real awakening, the dark truth. Heraclitus revealed wasn't just about women. It was about how men lose themselves in the emotional tempests of the feminine, not because they are weak, but because they are yearning to be chosen, to be needed, to be the one who stays when others leave. But that is not love. That is a transaction between wounds. And wounds don't create intimacy. They create dependency. Heraclitus taught that life is born through strife, not serenity. That what appears as conflict is actually a necessary crucible for truth. And so this man, once burned by the emotional fires of the woman he adored, had become something new, not bitter, not cold, but tempered. Like iron hammered by pain until it holds its shape. He no longer feared women's emotions, but he also no longer submitted to them. He no longer chased emotional highs or mistook suffering for intimacy. He had learned that real love, conscious, grounded love, begins after the chaos is no longer welcome, when two people choose presence over performance, when the war is no longer needed to feel alive. And for the man who has crossed that threshold, who has stood in the fire and not collapsed, there is only one truth left. Peace is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of self. He wished her well, truly, not as a script, not as a posture, but with the compassion of someone who had once needed her to feel whole. And now, finally, didn't. He hung up. The rain continued. Soft, steady. A new kind of silence surrounded him, not empty, but sacred. He walked into it, not as a man seeking something, but as a man who had found himself. And that is the fire Heraclitus saw beneath all things. Not chaos for its own sake, but transformation through it. The kind that leaves you quieter, stronger, unmoved. And when the next storm comes, as it always does, he will not run. He will not fight. He will simply remain, and in that stillness, he becomes the eye of the storm.